Hello, I'm Angela Princewell. I'm a family law lawyer in Ontario, Canada. And today I want to talk to you about unintended consequences of not having a marriage contract. So lately, I have been having a lot of consultations on marriage contracts, and both sides have had people who have assets and want to make sure that it's protected going into the relationship. And I have also met people who are very uncomfortable with the idea of getting a marriage contract, even though they need one. Or even worse, some people feel very slighted because their partner is proposing a marriage contract or a cohabitation agreement before they start to live together. And so, for those who feel uncomfortable about these types of agreements, I mean, all I can say is it's a matter of perspective. It's really that simple. I've heard all kinds of reasons. Do they think I'm a gold digger? I don't want anything from them. And, different sort of variations of that. How are we going into the relationship thinking it's going to end and whatnot. So the only example that I think, my example, I have many examples. The only one I'm going to give you today is think of it as life insurance. When you buy life insurance, you're not hoping to get into an accident, but there is a possibility that you could get into an accident, and you want to make sure that you're protecting yourself, that you're able to take care of any liabilities that arise as a result of that accident. And you get the insurance and you leave it and you move on. Home insurance, for example, right? I don't know anyone. I certainly don't want my house, you know, burning down or whatever and having to claim on that insurance. I am quite content to pay forever and never make a claim. That's kind of the dream. But you also want that, you want to know that if anything were to happen, that you are protected that way. And if we're being realistic here, there's a greater possibility of, a relationship breaking down than even your house catching on fire, right? So if for something that's if we're comfortable getting insurance, for something so unlikely to happen, I think we need to change our attitudes towards marriage contracts. But I am still a romantic. I still, believe in happily ever afters. But all I do say about marriage contracts is just get it and then forget it. Look at it as part of planning. It's part of your portfolio. It's part of looking at your insurance, financial planning, and whatnot. Just get it done. The good thing with these kinds of agreements, it's you could just do it and forget it. If nothing changes in your situation and you don't feel the need to look at it, then never do, right? But at least going in, set, set your expectations right. Line exactly what you want. And the truth is, for most people, what the default of the law is really not what they want. Many people, and that's why this video is about the unintended consequences, because many people going in are like, well, yeah, if we do break up, I don't want any of their assets. I just, want what's mine, or I don't care. Let's share it, whatever it is. But it's important to be intentional and to make sure that you're not just leaving things to default because you may not necessarily like the provisions of the law as it is today, or what it might be. Who knows what it might be if your relationship ever breaks down. So part of preparing for happily ever after is having some difficult conversations. And if you've kind of been sitting on the fence about, getting a marriage cohabitation agreement, I hope this would help. This would be just the nudge you need. Regarding cohabitation agreements, if you're just, cohabiting with your partner and you're thinking, well, maybe I should wait until we get married. We don't need it right now. Nope, you do. Get it right now. When you do get married, it would become a marriage contract and you don't need to do anything further, right? Except of course you want to change the terms, whatever, but that's totally up to you. You don't have to do anything after. So if I haven't convinced you yet by my ramblings, I will give you three reasons now why a marriage contract is for you. Because all three, yeah, I'm going to talk about it in reverse, sort of as consequences that could happen if you don't have a marriage contract. Now, I could do more than three. I could probably do 10, but I'm going to cap myself at three. I don't know why I chose three. Just seems reasonable. I want to keep it short and sweet and believe that less is more, and that you were hearing me when I say try to avoid the unintended consequences of not having a marriage contract. Okay. So what's one? So moving into a home you owned before marriage. Many people assume that because they own the property before marriage, if they were to break up, then, at the very least, they would get a deduction of, say, the down payment on the home, for example. In fact, some people go as far as thinking, well, it was a house that I owned before marriage. It's in my name only. I've been the only one paying the mortgage. Whatever happens down the road, it's still my property. It's in my name, and I get to keep it. None of this is true. None of it is true at all. Once you get married, once that home becomes a matrimonial home, you do not get a deduction of the down payment that you put towards that home. It's gone. You are sharing that with your partner. You do not get the fact that it's in your name only means nothing. You're still going to share that matrimonial home with your partner. So that's something that you want to think about. How much do you have riding on this home? Remember, when it comes to the matrimonial home, title does not matter. Don't expect that you will get a deduction. Some people even think they will get a deduction for the value of the home as of the date of marriage. No, you're not going to get that. You're not going to get your down payment back. None of that. That home would be split 50-50. Now, if it's a short-term marriage, of course, you may try to make an argument that it would be unconscionable for the other party to get 50%. And I hear you. That's an argument that can be made, but you have to remember that that's a very high threshold. It's not the threshold on whether it should be split 50-50 is not whether it's unfair, whether it's unreasonable. It's whether it is unconscionable. And unconscionable, I can tell you as someone who's tried to make this argument many times, is a pretty high threshold. So just don't put yourself in that situation. If you're quite content saying, well, I have all of this equity, I'm going into this relationship. I have, these hundreds of thousands in this home. And even if we're married for 5 minutes, 5 years, or 50 years, I don't care. I want to share this fully with my partner. Then go ahead and don't have that marriage contract. But what I hate is when I see people so upset years later to find out that a home that was solely in their names, in some cases even completely paid off before marriage, just seeing that, that paid off home, that home that I've had all these years, spouse is not even on title. If we look at, dollar contributions, for example, this partner hasn't contributed anything to it, knowing that they have to share that equally with their partner is usually a very bitter pill for most people to swallow. And that's why I'm saying try to avoid that consequence. If that's not what you want, please make sure you get a marriage contract signed. Another unintended consequence that I find a lot of times is when the lower earning um, partner becomes the higher income earner. So we're looking in terms of spousal support. Remember, your marriage contract doesn't only cover property. You could talk about a number of other things in there. Spousal support is a major one. How do you want to deal with that situation? If you're saying, well, I don't care if my partner is making more, and if going into the relationship, and if I'm making more, and no matter what happens under any circumstance, I am fine having to pay them support, well, then fine, you don't have to do anything. However, for most people, it's not always that straightforward, right? It might be, I've seen cases where one partner was the breadwinner all through the relationship, maybe does something, terrible, cheats on their partner, whatever, relationship is breaking down. And, or sometimes people are just going through, whatever they're going through, right? They're going through a life crisis of some sort. It goes from cheating to perhaps drugs to them losing their job. And now the lower income earner, the person that was just, the supplementary income earner, now becomes the greater income earner at the date of separation through circumstances that, were beyond their control, unplanned, whatever. Oftentimes, that person does not want to have to pay spousal support to the other. And yes, I know there's entitlement thresholds to deal with and all of that, but in some circumstances, because of a series of events that have happened leading up to separation, the other party is entitled to spousal support. And now that the person who came into the relationship as the lower income earner now feels like they just feel so terrible that they have to pay spousal support under these circumstances. So that's one that I'm seeing lately, and it's unfortunate because had they known that that would be, that there'll be these ton of events and that there will be entitlement by the other spouse, they will have organized their affairs differently, and that is why I am bringing it to your attention today. So don't look at life just today. Yes, today you're lower income earner, you're not earning any income, and that's great. Is that how it's going to always be? What if you're a student, for example, right? So if you're a professional student, for example, you may come into that relationship as the lower income earner, and as the years go by, you're now making a higher income. Well, if that's the case, are you content to pay what could be significant sums of spousal support to the other party should the relationship, you know, break down? There's even, I had a case where, in this case, our client became a dentist after several years of marriage, and upon becoming a dentist, the partner that had a very well paying job as an engineer, just slowly over the years stopped working. And it was never my client's intention to have the partner stop working as an engineer that was making, very significant income at the time. But then over the years, that's just what happened. And even though every once in a while my client expressed discontent about it, the point became that the fact was at the date of separation, our client was the one with the higher income. That was a very unintended consequence because going into this marriage, he was the lower income earner, and you know it just turned out that way. Again, if that's something that you're not concerned about, well, that's fine. Frankly, I think even when you're not concerned about some of these consequences, it's worth putting it in writing just so that it's clear that you're not concerned about it as well. I'm not here advocating for your contract to necessarily absolve you of all liability. What I'm speaking about and what I encourage is being intentional. So if you don't want that unintended consequence of having to pay spousal support because now your career has taken off and now you're making more than your partner did, then just do a contract so that it's clear however you want support to play out should there be a breakdown in the relationship. The last unintended consequence I'm going to talk about is people's inheritances. Many people, of course, know that if they have an inheritance, that it is excluded property. So for the most part, you can keep it free and clear from the other spouse. Well, what happens without a marriage contract, for example, and you put that money into renovating your matrimonial home? Well, come date of separation, you not only lost your matrimonial home that you probably, invested a lot into, assuming you're the sole owner. But now you've also put in your inheritance there that you could have excluded, but you can't exclude now because it's in a matrimonial home. In some cases as well, it could be a jointly owned matrimonial home. Both parties might have, contributed equally to investing in that property. But one party is thinking, well, I have this inheritance and, it's mine. I get to keep it. But if you don't have a conversation with the other person, if you don't document it in the form of a domestic contract, what you're agreeing to, well, if you put in that money into the home and at the breakdown of the relationship, it's completely at the other person's discretion if they would allow that inheritance. And I know most people are good and all that, but frankly, all bets are off when separation time comes. So, John may have agreed that yes, put your $50,000 into renovating the home. It's your home, I know, and all that. However, when something happens, they could just all of a sudden take a different position, right? And now you don't get that inheritance that you've put into this matrimonial home or just family property in general. And I know I sound like I'm just speaking to married people, but these unintended consequences apply just the same with, of course, some modification to people in common law relationships. So takeaway for today, try to avoid any unintended consequences. decide what you want, be intentional about how you want your relationship to be. And, if there is a breakdown in, the way of honoring that relationship and respecting, the time that you've been together is making sure that if it ends, you end it with as little conflict as possible. And generally, a marriage contract or cohabitation agreement would help you do that. So I hope I've given you a little nudge today to, consider more seriously. Actually, you're done considering. Pick up the phone, email us, come get your marriage contract done or your cohabitation agreement done. It's important. It's part of your life planning, and you want to make sure you do it to avoid unintended consequences that may flow if your relationship breaks down and you do not have a marriage contract or cohabitation agreement. So that's it for today. And until next time, it's bye for now.